All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ariel Rivers, NACD's Pacific Region representative, and I will facilitate this 1-hour NACD Urban and Community Conservation webinar. Thank you for joining us today to learn from Greenville County SWCD about their Soil Your Undies exploration series. We will record this webinar and post it to NACD's YouTube. Please feel free to share it widely with anyone that may be interested in viewing the webinar after today's session. Now I'll turn it over to Ron to provide a few introductory comments on behalf of NACD's Urban and Community Resource Policy Group.
And thank you, Ariel, and welcome all of you to the monthly Urban and Community Conservation webinars offered by the National Association of Conservation Districts through the support of our sole sponsor, the Scotts Miracle-Gro Company. These sessions are designed by NACD's Urban and Community Resource Policy Group, a subcommittee of district officials and partners charged with guiding the association services and support for districts' work in developing areas. Our goal for these webinars is to help districts share what they are doing nationwide and enable them to learn from each other and various agencies and organizations. And we appreciate the support of the Scotts Miracle-Gro Foundation for making them possible. I invite you to let us know what you think about each webinar and what other topics you would like us to cover by contacting NACD staffer Ariel Rivers. And please tell our NACD leadership what type of assistance you would like from your national association for your work in urban and community conservation. And now, off to Ariel. You're muted, Ariel.
All right, thank you. And I see there are several people on this call who joined us earlier this week at NACD's national meeting in Orlando, Florida. So we've been in a lot of meetings this week. So thank you everyone for your patience as we have yet another networking and learning opportunity this week. So on that note, I would like to emphasize again Ron's comment that if you have any suggestions about the work that NACD can be doing in the urban and community conservation space, please feel free to reach out at any point in time. We have a series of questions that we are posing to districts now in thinking about how we may be able to address your needs in the best ways possible, and I'll send those out along with the recording. So please feel free to contact myself or Ron at any point in time if you have any suggestions about the work that we should be doing through our committee. And so now I'd like to introduce our webinar speaker. We have Shanine Haler, the Stormwater Programs Coordinator with Greenville County SWCD. Shanine is a Minnesota native with a background in agriculture and a passion for teaching. Through her time in Panama with the Peace Corps and working with local nonprofits, Shanine has extensive experience educating on sustainability and agriculture. And since joining the Greenville County SWCD, she has broadened her skill set to managing the Greenville County Seed Library, creating virtual lessons for students of all ages, and learning all about soil and soil health. She spends her free time hiking, gardening, and running with her dog, Winston. So thank you very much for your presentation today, Shanine. And she has suggested that people are also welcome to interrupt her throughout her presentation. If you have a question, feel free to type those in the chat box per normal, and we can address those later if you feel more comfortable, or alternatively, you may come off mute and ask her throughout her presentation. So thank you, Shanine. And with that, I'll turn it over to you to share your screen and get started.
Thank you, Ariel, and hello, everyone. Good, I guess, late afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to jump right in. Let's do this. So I'm here tonight to talk about, or this afternoon, feels like evening already. I'm here to talk about our soil health exploration series that we did in partnership with our county library system. And I just want to give you all an overview of how we prepared for a program like this, where the idea came from, and then at the end of class, I want to talk a little bit about the lessons we learned. I'm also going to give you just a little sample of what we covered during those 2 live classes. It was a really great first run of this program, and I really think moving forward, we have learned a lot, and we're going to be able to bring this really interactive way to talk about soil health to more and more citizens in our county, and hopefully y'all can use this program as well. Also, on the note of interrupting me, please do. I would love for this to be a informal discussion more than anything else. We're all like professionals here, and I'm sure many of us are educators as well. And so if you have input or have a question at any time, just go ahead, unmute yourself and like catch my attention. I can't see you all right now, so that would be the most helpful. All right, so this is today's class agenda and our inspiration. So our inspiration for creating a soil health exploration was actually the Soil Your Undies challenge that was started in Oregon through definitely the USDA and Oregon NRCS. So they created this whole Soil Your Undies idea, and there are maps online of where people have done this. And basically what you do, you bury a pair of 100% cotton underwear in an area that you want to know how your soil health is doing. This is not a soil test. This is not measuring nutrient levels, organic matter levels. This is measuring the life in the soil, really specifically microbe activity in the soil, which is one of the best indicators of soil health. So we saw these really cool pictures. Yeah.
This is Ariel. We're seeing your slide view and not the presentation views.
Oh no.
So if you want to switch that over to the presentation view.
Let me see what I can do about that. I appreciate that. You're still seeing slide view?
Yes.
I'm going to stop and start again. Screen 2. There we go. How about now?
Yes, now we're seeing the presentation.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Okay, so anyway, that was our inspiration. And that turned into figuring out how can we, because it was more geared towards farmers and not so much urban people. And our county is more urban, and we're looking for more ways to kind of engage people that maybe aren't like at a farmer level, but have like small home gardens or are looking for ways to improve the way that they care for the environment around them. So we reformatted and restructured a little bit. So we partnered with our Greenville County Library System. Previous to this presentation, or I guess soil health exploration, I had taught with them already. Our library system is really great with their outreach, and so they were already doing virtual classes. So we had done for about a year previous to starting this, a whole series of classes around stormwater and gardening and all of that with our library. So it was an easy pairing there. And then we definitely wanted to make sure that this was going to be virtual. It was also recorded, so we did 2 live classes, one at the very beginning and one at the very end. Remember, those undies need to be in the ground for 60 days. So during those 2 months that we weren't going to meet, every other week, we sent out another small experiment that our participants could do on their own. And I'm going to go over what each one of those were, and I'll show you what we put in each of our kits. Again, the benefit of partnering with our library system is that we were able to get kits across the county. Patrons of the library could sign up for the class online and then request that a kit be delivered to their nearest library branch. So we had people from all over our county accessing the materials to participate in this class. How did we promote? We promoted through the normal things these days. Social media was a heavy one, emails, and then again, our library system really helped us get the word out. And because we did it through the library, it was primarily library patrons that participated. Okay, so here's our budget, and these are the items that we gave to each participant. They each got 2 3.5-inch marking flags. They each got 1 pair of 100% cotton underwear. They each got a small square of netting, and they each got a couple rubber bands. I believe we did 2 rubber bands. So our total cost for the entire, to make 50 kits, so 50 participants, was $110, $111, let's say, and about $220 per kit. So per engaged, and really, we had a few couples that joined us on our live calls. I'm sure there were some families that engaged in this too. So I don't know that 50 equals people, but 50 kits went to like 50 different households is what we assume. Okay, before I go to the next slide, are there any questions or comments or clarity kind of on the preparation side of this? Ariel, do you see anything?
It doesn't look like it so far.
Okay, awesome. Yes, and as Kirsten mentioned in the chat, the live classes, quote unquote, were definitely via Zoom. We've done everything as COVID friendly as possible with this program. Okay. So now I would love to kind of go over how we did our first live class. I'm going to speed through some pieces, but I think kind of showing y'all what we covered related to soil health might actually benefit all of us. Honestly, we can always learn something. So soil health exploration. So at this point, all of our participants had their kits in hand and they were at their home mostly ready to go. We asked that all of our participants provide their own glass jar or glass cup of some sort and their own trowel to dig a hole for their undies. And we provided, well, and I'll show you how this first class went. So we always do welcome and introductions. I like to go ahead and put the information of everybody that will be talking during our presentation. My manager, Kirsten Robertson, also presented on this one. And then we always ask people to gather their materials. Most people will already be prepared, but we want to make sure everybody is on the same page before we even get started. So there's that shovel or trowel and a marker. I forgot that when I mentioned earlier. And then setting up your virtual learning space. This one is unique, especially if you're only doing it over Zoom. Sometimes you have people that aren't so familiar with a Zoom setup. So definitely like providing some time for your participants to go through and like hit each one of these steps or whatever steps you choose was really helpful for a lot of our online classes. And then I usually have an agenda. So we'll cover soil basics, soil life, soil health principles, the Soil Your Undies challenge, and then we'll do a brief overview of what's to come in the next 2 months. So first we talk about soil composition. I would imagine most of us here have heard this before, but soil is 50% air and water, 45% mineral content or sand, silt, clay, and 5% organic matter. It's really that organic matter that indicates soil health. The other components matter, but we're going to pay special attention to the organic matter today. What we're looking at in organic matter, we have about 50 to 80% humus or very dead, very decomposed organic matter. Then we're looking at about 25% actively decomposing, 10% like just dead things, and 5% is living roots and organisms. That teeny 5% of 5% is what we measure to measure soil health with this experiment. And then we usually go to the crowd, what is soil? So I guess we can do that together too. What is soil? If y'all want to like type what soil is in the chat box, if you're able, we'll just do like a quick 30 seconds here. And this is kind of how we try to engage our audience too. Don't be shy. I know we all know. I know many of us may have an idea. Soil is life. Yes, Amanda. That's awesome. You are also welcome to unmute yourself. An ecosystem of living creatures and inorganic and organic matter. Yes, love that. A valuable natural resource. Yes, Linda. Okay. What we grow things in. Yes, Kirsten. These are all correct answers. So this would go on for a little bit. Maybe people would interact. And then I have a list here of what we usually cover. Soil is a habitat, which we mentioned. It holds a whole host of organisms that we can see and that we can't see. It's a growing medium, to Kirsten's point. It's an anchor. It anchors homes in the ground. It anchors trees in the ground. It anchors things to the earth. It's a building material. It's a nutrient source. This is where plants get their nutrients, and We get our nutrients from plants and animals get their nutrients from plants. So really it's a nutrient source for all living things. It's a water filter. That one almost never comes up, and that's a really important one. Basically, soil is foundational to all life. Without soil, we wouldn't be here. So what is soil life and why does it matter? So there's a whole food web of living things in the soil. And not to get too deep into this, but there are a whole bunch of different levels, and there are visible things and invisible things to our naked eye, to the human naked eye. And the majority of soil life is teeny, teeny, tiny. Kirsten would usually take over at this point and talk about some of the more technical pieces. And what she talks about is why we talk so much about microorganisms as soil life. So what plant roots on this first trophic level, the photosynthesizers, plants, what they exude from their roots is called glomalin. It's this sticky substance that microbes love, love, love to eat. Those microbes eat that glomalin or are attracted to that glomalin. There we go. The microbes give off the glomalin. They're the ones that come and like chill around the roots. Glomalin holds soil particles together, but also apart. So it kind of makes soil like a sponge, which provides air, pore space is what we call that air and water space in soil, pore space. It makes spaces so that the soil that are so important to good soil. Okay, where are we going? This is one of my favorite lines from Kirsten. Spaces are where the magic happens. If you have a brick, nothing gets through that brick. Things don't grow in bricks. If our soil doesn't have spaces, essentially it becomes a brick as well. Water can't travel through it, animals can't burrow into it, and plants can't grow in it. So our soil is not doing very well if there are no spaces. And what makes those spaces? The microbes that give off the glomalin. There we go. So how do we go from a brick of soil to a sponge of soil or a healthy, spongy soil? We talk about soil health principles, and there are things that we can all encourage to help soil and help our environment mimic nature. And these are the 5 things. There are hand motions for all of these, and I'm going to encourage everyone to join me as we go through the hand motions. You have your soil, can be either your left or your right hand, and your motion piece is your other hand. First one is keep it covered. Second one, we'll go through them all here, and then we'll go through them as we talk more in depth too. So keep it covered. Do not disturb or limit disturbance. Keep a living root. Your fingers become roots in your soil. Maximize plant diversity. Your fingers become plants, and they're all a little different, right? We all got different size fingers. And then integrate animals. I guess like you can make whatever animal feels right on your hands. Maybe it's a, I don't know, a chicken. Okay. So those are the five soil health principles, and we're going to talk about each one of them. First, keep it covered. Mimic a forest floor. You will never walk into a forest and see bare soil or very little bare soil, and that is the idea. The soil will be cooler, which means the temperature regulates, which is a better environment for things to live in and things to grow in. There will be less erosion. When rain hits bare soil, it takes away that first layer of soil. This is why like plowed fields, especially on a hillside, don't have a lot of topsoil left because of erosion, because it's just exposed topsoil. Leaf matter, organic matter of any sort covering that soil helps prevent erosion. There's less weeding. If weeds can't see sunlight, weed seeds can't see sunlight, they can't grow. So keep it covered. Number 2, limit disturbance. Traditionally, we think about plows and tillers as the primary disturbance, and that is true. Plows and tillers will break up the fungi and the glomalin, holding the pore spaces open, so the soil has no choice but to become a brick. Exposure to sun and that much extra air kills the important teeny tiny beings in the soil. No-till gardening and no-dig gardening are great options as an alternative to this, especially on a smaller scale. On larger scale, it gets a little bit trickier, but if we can start to shift our expectations of what like a healthy, productive field looks like and start to get a little bit more comfortable with some plant debris around, that will help our soil health in the long run. The other thing that's considered disturbance are chemical, especially like herbicides and pesticides, that disturbs the natural cycles that happen in the soil, even if they're applied to plants. So keeping that in mind as well, limiting the use of kind of not natural, limiting the tilling of the soil, and then limiting the compaction as well, which is also like a physical disturbance of the soil. Basically, it's like if somebody took a tractor and drove it over your house a bunch of times, like your space is going to get teeny, teeny, tiny and just slowly squish. So fewer things can live in that space. Okay, so we have keep it covered and limit disturbance. Awesome. Keep a living root. So Mother Nature always has a living root. If we let the land do what it wants, it will grow something. It will always grow something. And those microbes need food, but they're not too picky. So they're going to eat kind of whatever's there. But if we have nothing growing, they have nothing to eat. They go find food because that's what we would do too. And they leave that soil to fend for itself. Use cover crops in the off season to keep those microbes fed. So if you are kind of operating on a seasonal garden or something of that nature, having something living in the ground is super, super important to maintain and continue to improve your soil's health. So we have keep it covered, limit disturbance, keep a living root. Okay. And number 4 is maximize plant diversity. So living root number 1, even if it's just all the same thing, but if you really want to step up your soil health game, you're going to maximize the diversity of your plants. You're going to have different, in a forest, you never see just all of the same tree. You're going to see tall trees, smaller trees, you're going to see ground cover, you're going to see kind of like mid-level forest things. Having a variety of plants encourages a variety of animals and insects, and encourages a variety of uses of the soil's nutrients, and the way that those roots interact and intertwine will only make soil health better. Different plants together build a stronger system against drought, against pests, and against diseases. Okay, keep it covered, number 1. Number 2, limit disturbance. Number 3, keep a living root. Number 4, maximize plant diversity. And last but not least, integrate animals. There is no natural system that does not have some kind of animal in it. It does not have to be an actual live animal in your space. It can even just be like animal waste or animal byproducts. So looking at manure or really quality compost, blood meal, bone meal, fish emulsion. Use something that is derived from animals in your soil to amend your soil, keeping in the spirit of mimicking nature for soil health. All right. So let's do all 5, and then we will go on to the next piece. Keep it covered, limit disturbance, keep a living root, maximize plant diversity, and integrate animals. Voila, 5 principles of soil health. And then we get into the Soil Your Undies challenge. So we're going to measure our soil's health with the Soil Your Undies challenge. What is the Soil Your Undies challenge? It was started in Oregon in 2018, like I've already mentioned, to test their soil health. It involves planting a pair of 100% cotton underwear to see how healthy your soil is. Then we put together a series of small videos to show how each experiment should go. So this is just me digging a hole and putting underwear in it and then covering that hole up. Go to the next. And then we also have the directions written for anyone that might not be able to access our video, or for those that do better reading directions versus hearing directions. And then at this point, we pause and we gave our participants 10 minutes to go out, plant their undies, and come back. Because we know we all lead very busy lives, and they had scheduled that hour of time in their busy lives to do this experiment. So we wanted to make sure that we gave them time to actually plant their undies during our time together. And it worked out super well. We also sent an email to all of our participants, and in that like pre-lesson email, we said, try to know where you want to plant these. You will have time during our webinar to go and do so. Okay, so remember we said we gave them 2 marking flags. One of the marking flags was to mark where they planted their undies, and they, on the flag itself, we wrote the date that we planted them. All right, and then this is what came next. And these are the dates that we used every 2 weeks is the structure. We had them do a critter critique. We had them do a soil structure experiment, or an aggregate experiment, essentially. And then we did a find your hard pan experiment. And finally, we held a results class together where we had our participants come and show us their undies that they had uncovered. In that second class, we gave them time to go and dig up their underwear and bring it back. So here's the critter critique, and we put together little information sheets, and we sent this all via email with a video and the information sheet. We encourage participants to take good notes and bring it all to that final virtual class. So we had them look for earthworms, ants, beetles, and grubs, things you can see and identify pretty easily, and then said, take some notes. Left them some information on why they matter, why we're looking for them. Earthworms obviously are one of the best things to add to your soil to increase soil health, especially if it's really, really poor. Yes. And then our soil structure experiment, we gave them the netting and the rubber band for this. We had them get a little aggregate or a little ball of soil, and we explained this all in a video because that was easier for this particular experiment. They left that soil aggregate, they dump water, you put the netting over it, and then you attach the netting with a rubber band to the top of whatever jar or glass you have, and then you put your soil aggregate in the netting and pour water over the top of that. And depending on how quickly or slowly it breaks apart is an indicator of soil health. And we gave them kind of times to watch it. And then finally, find your hard pan. Again, we made a little video for this one because that was the easiest way to explain it. But basically, yes. Basically what we did is we used that second marking flag as a penetrometer, a very rudimentary penetrometer. And we had our participants just like go in the area again where they planted their undies and shove the flag in as far as they could. What we found through our experimenting is that the flag and the actual penetrometer were pretty close to the same finding hard pan, which was pretty awesome to learn, actually. It makes this experiment doable in a home setting without special equipment. Okay, so that was the third experiment, and then we had a live results class. Really, what we did, we brought back all of our participants, and we did these things. We went over why soil life matters again, just to kind of really hit home with that message. And we went over the soil health principles. Really, this is the key takeaway that we wanted. We wanted to give our participants some action items that they could do based on the results of the experiment. So since we've just been over these, I won't bore you with them again. And then we did show your undies. So here's where we took a break. We said, go get your undies, bring them back. Once you're all back, like turn your videos on again, and we will go ahead and have everyone show them. So these are the results from Oregon. My personal favorite is the puppies, because you see that they got bigger too. So cute. These were my personal results. And then we had our participants show their results as well. So we talked about what it means, what your undies look like and what that means. Degradation or decomposition indicates an active soil life. The more degraded or the less cotton you have, the more microbe activity you have. More active microbes mean a healthier soil. So the ideal is to have just that rubber strip on the top. That's what we're looking for. And then we talked about the critter critique. We went over what they found, why it mattered. We talked about the soil stability test, and the faster your clod breaks apart, the less stable your soil is, essentially. Like, it would basically mean your house falls apart the minute water touches it. So that is definitely concerning. And then the find your hard pan experiment. We talked about the deeper your hard pan is, the better, because roots typically cannot penetrate past that hard pan, which is why we look for earthworms, because earthworms are one of the main players in eliminating that hard pan, or at least deepening your hard pan. And then we had a little chart here. And Kathy, I see your question there. We were happy to share all of these materials. I will work on putting together a little package. I'll get that to Ariel, and I think she has contact information for everyone. So we will definitely get that put together. So we gave our participants some practices around soil health and which principle it covered. And then we have a larger spreadsheet that explains why it works too, but for the purposes of this presentation, this is how we kind of presented that. Well, for the purposes of this class, this is how we presented the information. And it's really just some easy, like, first steps, right? Mulch around your plants, pretty low hanging fruit. You can even use leaves. And we went over a few of them with our participants. I don't remember why we had this picture in here. We may have skipped over it, but I think the primary goal here was to show that, like, a diversity of plants will pull your root system in different areas. So if you can see on the far, I guess, left for me, I'm not sure what it is for all of y'all. There's this teeny tiny little grass, and that's probably, like, what does it say? Kentucky bluegrass. Super hard to read in this format. But you see the root system there, it's super tiny. And the rest of these plants here are more native plants that have bigger, deeper root systems. So we're just kind of encouraging people to consider different options for some of their green spaces. And then we asked our participants to give us some feedback, because we're still kind of fine tuning how we want this program to look. We definitely wanted to get feedback from people that have been through it. So what surprised you? What do you like? And this is kind of like the typical evaluation that you would do, that really best practice would be to do after every seminar. We do not do that, but it was helpful. If I recall correctly, the undies themselves were a favorite part, just to, like, see the differences. And then I think we had one gentleman say that he would mulch more, if I recall. This was a while ago, so I'm not sure what these answers were.
Janine, before you move off from that, I'm curious, I actually had some questions that I jotted down about the evaluation. So I'm kind of curious if you wouldn't mind spending just a couple minutes, maybe going over what you think people's sort of initial understanding of soil health was prior to the session. And then, you know, if they have sort of implemented any of these additional practices, or if you connect them with other people in your staff, for example, or in the office, the district's office too. Like, if the gentleman wants to mulch more, you know, does he have an opportunity to continue learning more through other avenues with the district?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. Yes. So going into this, we assumed most people would not know about soil health principles, especially. We did have one participant that was very well versed in most things soil, but he even learned something around soil health, which was really cool to see and know. I would definitely say that we tried to cover the basics. And unfortunately, when talking about soil health, it feels like you need to know more than you really do. Really, it's just like making a nice habitat for microbes in the soil. That's what we're trying to do, which is why I tend to use like the house comparison a lot, because it's something that almost everyone can relate to. As far as continuing resources, that's something we're still working on. We definitely like have the knowledge here within our Soil and Water Conservation District, and Kirsten and I always give our information out anytime we're talking about soil health. So we're working on getting more resources and more easily accessible resources together. I would love to see us have a list someday of like, in conjunction with that spreadsheet that says these are the things you can do to improve your soil health. Like if it requires a vendor, here's a website, here's like more resources. Because we can't teach everything, providing them with some local and good like online resources. Yeah, that's a goal. I appreciate you bringing that up though. So if anybody has ideas, send them my way, because that's the next step in this. All right, I see a question in the chat. Working with the library seems like a great untapped resource for outreach. What led you to approach that partnership, and have you teamed up with them in the past? Yes, okay, great question. So we actually run a seed library in conjunction with our library system. So that started in, I believe, 2019. My predecessor started that whole setup. So we have a really good working relationship with our library system. And then during the pandemic, we capitalized on that to help start teaching with the library too. Were they receptive and excited about working? Yes. From what I understand, and I wasn't here when we kind of really started this partnership, there was a little bit of hesitation or question of how successful a seed library program would be. And we have seen huge success with that. So we've gained a lot of confidence with our library partners. Ooh, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Basically, what questions do you have? I end everything I do with that. And then a thank you with our contact info. Yay. Let me stop share so I can see this chat a little bit easier. Okay. Thanks for bearing with me for a second there. I have a kit right here, Shelby. Give me 1 second. Like this. So we have our 2 flags. We wrapped the pair of undies around that. Inside the undies is that netting that I talked about for the jar, and we connected it all with the rubber band that they need. I think our library, in the interest of modesty, put them into like sandwich bags as well. I don't think that's necessary. It's up to you. Yeah. What
All right.
questions can we answer?
Yeah, I was just going to say, everyone, please feel free to put some questions in the chat box for Shanine. Feel free to hop off mute as well, and post some questions too if you have any. Shanine, I'm curious. So we talked a little bit about some of the ongoing learning opportunities that you're hoping to develop and connect the spreadsheet, for example, to additional resources that people may be able to access after this learning session. But I'm curious what other ongoing learning opportunities you're thinking about doing. Like, will you do this session again? Have you identified other models that you might be able to implement with this like experimentation approach in a virtual learning platform, et cetera?
Yeah, wow, great questions. Kirsten and I have worked really closely on getting this particular format and session put together. I think it was really successful. I also like the idea of having this like longer time frame of contact with the same people, I think it's an opportunity to build a deeper relationship. My goals for this particular experiment is to bring it into classrooms next, and Kirsten and I will kind of work out how that looks. But I think that like high school FFA groups or agriculture classes or even science classes might be really interested in using this as like an ongoing piece of their classroom learning too. And it's just a matter of making some of those better connections with those educators. Kirsten, do you have something to add to that?
I do. Shanine and I have talked about how neat it would be to have children grow up knowing this, and that's certainly a goal. Absolutely. I worked a Master Gardener symposium last weekend, and we did a booth, and actually one of the speakers touched on soil health just a little bit, but it was enough that I had about 4 people come over and say, hey, your name has soil in it. Do you talk about soil health? And I was like, and they were like, we really want to know more. And so I think it's going to become a thing for more people, more of the mainstream. And I'm excited that we are ready for this. And we are definitely trying to look into how we can do this as more of a class and that kind of thing. So it's pretty exciting. It's good stuff.
I see the question, what did you find in your evaluation? I wish I would have taken better notes, because we only had 2 live participants in our final class. So we got feedback from those 2 participants, one of which was kind of the soil expert to start with. And both said, liked the format, really liked the results. It was cool to see something that was in our hands. Kirsten, if I'm missing something, please like type it or say so. That is what I'm recalling from that. It was on me for not taking more thorough notes. I see another question. Were you able to help the folks whose undies didn't decompose? Well, we haven't followed up with them, and we didn't really like make that a requirement for the class. But with our spreadsheet of like, these are the things you can do, we encourage them to kind of take some steps from that spreadsheet.
Let me jump in here. So one of the things that we have come up with for urban gardeners, and we have a lot of just people who have yards, and how does soil health, how does that relate to just landscaping and yards? And so we encourage them, because we're big on stormwater, we encourage them to keep their mower height taller so that they have better roots. And we talk about the living roots. We talk about them adding clover to their lawn, which is just crazy for a lot of people to even think about, but explain that the clover actually fertilizes their lawn for them. It adds diversity, and it fits into those soil health principles. And adding natives, like any areas that they have that like the little pocket prairies are important, and making sure things are mulched. These people just had a bare yard, and so I figured that probably the best thing they could do is to add some, and that's why their undies didn't degrade at all. It was just out in the middle of a lawn. So I figured the best thing they could do was raise their mower height and add clover. So that's the best we could do without actually being there and seeing it and actually talking to them. And
Kathy, I saw your question on videos recorded. Yes. And we have found, much like the NACD webinars in this series, we get some participation in the live classes and a lot more participation on people's own time. So looking at it now, it looks like we have more views on those videos, many more views than we did actual live participants. And I shared a link to the YouTube playlist from our library that has our live classes on there recorded, and some more of the classes that we've done with the library. Any other questions? I'm happy to answer whatever.
Yeah, Shanine, I'm curious as well. So we already heard about how some of your partnership worked out with the library, but I'm curious if you have any suggestions. A question we often get among people that are interested in expanding into the urban or stormwater management space, backyard gardening space, is who the best partners may be and who some funding sources are. So I'm curious if you could share just from your perspective, some of the most successful relationships that you've built and how you've been able to sort of capture the attention of that audience as well beyond just the library.
Oh, that's a big question. I love your questions, Ariel. They're so good. I would definitely say the library is our biggest like foot in the door. Outside of the library, man, putting me on this spot, I do a lot of work with after school programs as well. We are a little bit unique as a soil and water conservation district in that we work very, very closely with our county. Like my position wouldn't be here if we weren't part of our county as well. Our county, like, I guess, what is it? Our county systems. We sit at County Square here in Greenville. So I work with the after school programs, which are run at community centers. That's another foot in the door. I think we occasionally can underestimate the power of like connecting with children, both so that they learn, but also you're getting some FaceTime with students as well. Clemson Extension is another way that we have another strong partner of ours here in Greenville County, and they're all over the state. So that's definitely a great resource. A lot of our messaging lines up, especially with our 4-H educator here. So that's been really good for making connections. I would say those two. We also occasionally partner with municipalities, which is an ongoing development. That's another place to look, especially if you have somebody really active in one of your municipalities in outreach. I would suggest that too. We have some that are great and some that are less great. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. And sort of a follow-up to that, someone had asked as well how many libraries you have in your system within your county, and how many were willing to participate as well.
3, 4, 5. So our library system has a lot of libraries. I don't know more than 8. And we work with the central staff, and they have like an adult outreach coordinator and a youth outreach coordinator. So we kind of work on like the managerial level to put on these webinars. So all library locations are able to hand out kits or spread information in that way. When we go back to live and in-person programming, we'll start to look at like which libraries are interested in having us come.
All right, that was super helpful. Thank you. And so there's another additional question as well in the chat box about any specific lessons learned. I know you've shared some so far, but how would you do things differently as you continue to develop this program?
Yeah, I want to do it live. I want to go somewhere and do this with people. I think having like the example in front of you and like having somebody like interact with that would be really cool. I think it would be awesome to do this with like a school or a community garden group. Here in Greenville County, our county rec also like does raised garden beds for rent at some of their facilities. So it might be really neat to like connect with some of those groups and do this in a way that we can like be interactive. I think that will encourage, it's easier for us to teach soil health when we can touch soil, first of all. And then it may encourage some deeper questions and allow for us to provide some really like concrete, this is what you would do in this situation at this place. As far as if we did it in the exact same way, I would love to see us get more participation. And I think that would be just through like leveraging some more partnerships, perhaps opening it up outside of the library to allow people to come in. You don't have to have a library card, but we generally rely pretty heavily on the library to do the advertising. And I think we could upfront recruit a little bit better as well. Thanks for the questions.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have another one for you as well.
Mhm.
So I loved the hand motions. I think that's super helpful. I do a lot of webinars, obviously, so keeping people engaged throughout them and ensuring that they're listening can be somewhat of a challenge, of course. So was that something that you had read about, or was that an idea that you had thought of yourself? And do you have any other tips, for the virtual sessions to keep people, moving, active, participatory, et cetera?
Yeah. Oh, love that question. Hand motions are all Kirsten. She does that whether she's in person, virtual. Like I would, to tease her a little bit, would imagine that she might just hum along to that as she's making dinner or something. It's great, and it works with all age groups in all settings. They're amazing and very interactive. As far as keeping people interactive and like engaged in a virtual setting, I definitely like to do like the answer the question in the chat kind of thing, like we did at the very beginning with what is soil. That's also why I say turn your videos on if you're able and interrupt me when you can, because I think it's easy in a virtual space, and I'm guilty of it as well, to just like turn this on and listen to it in the background. And I think like the face-to-face, at least time, encourages us to be a little more attentive. I also like to pause and wait for questions in the middle of all of my presenting. So like we'll cover a big topic and then we'll pause and wait for questions, and we'll do the same and pause and wait for questions. A really awesome part of what we've been able to do, because we had been able to give out kits, usually there's some kind of activity that we're asking our participants to do while we're teaching. We did a paint your watershed class, which is still my favorite one that we've done. No offense to soil health, I think it's also great, and like this is way cooler learning. But we had people, like it was like basically a paint and sip. So we had people paint along with us and interact in that way as we taught about watersheds. So we're actually working on expanding that into like some different areas as well. But just having people like have something to do while you're teaching about the thing that they're doing, I think that helps a lot. We also occasionally we'll use like it's kind of like a quiz style on Zoom. I don't know if y'all have seen that yet, but you can like have people chime in and then it shows where all the answers were. I don't get that fancy with it. I just say like, type your answer in the chat box. Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky virtually. I will say that. I also think like having a good combination of pictures and words is really important. We're all like different learning styles and learning types, and to hit some of those more like hands-on learning styles virtually is really, really challenging. So you try to use like images and little videos here and there to really like try to diversify the learning styles, cater to those. Oh, and you asked about how I do this or how I know. I studied education in college, so I had a little bit of a background in knowing at least like where to start.
Yeah, that's excellent. And it's great that you've been able to translate some of that into the virtual learning space as well. And especially through avenues like this and sharing your work through your webinar. And so I know that we have a hard stop at 5 p.m. Eastern. So I want to check in really quick and make sure that we don't have any additional questions from the audience. And I haven't seen any come through in a couple minutes. But I would encourage everyone to reach out to Shanine with additional questions. We'll share the webinar out and any resources as well after we get this posted on our YouTube. So thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. Do you have any final closing thoughts or anything else you'd like to end with, Shanine, or Kirsten for that matter?
I have nothing more. Thank you all so much for attending.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you and enjoy your afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Take care.
Ariel, do you